plastic is one controversial subject because without plastic it seems people are not able to manage.
Plastic is a fantastic material.
What is the role of landfills in solid waste management?
So that depends a lot. How much is landfill depends a lot on where in the world you're situated. So I'm based in Sweden, and we don't landfill almost anything from municipal household waste because we have incineration plants. So Sweden is a cold country, so we need the heat.
What may end up in the landfills or in the incineration plants can be hazardous, right? So how do you think is the best way to handle this, and how capable the technology or people are to handle this?
It's easy for us as experts to think that it's supernatural, but it's definitely not.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Today we have Asa Stenmarck joining us to discuss a very important topic regarding solid waste management, how to make it more efficient, more sustainable. Asa, please welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Asa is an expert in material flow in solid waste management. She has worked as a researcher for 18 years in Swedish Environmental Research Institute, IVL, and she is currently working as a material flow expert. Asa, thanks for joining the podcast and warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much. It's going to be fun, I think.
Sure. So, Asa, before we get started, there are a couple of things that I wanted to discuss. So, solid waste management is a big problem, right? And there are so many aspects to solid waste management. There are few common areas which I wanted to discuss today. And particularly, I wanted to kind of get some perspectives on it with respect to technology and behavior of people also, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
The first question that I wanted to ask you is, what is the role of landfills in solid waste management? Because oftentimes what happens is all the solid waste that is collected, right, is sent to landfills, and those landfills start getting problems, right? So what exactly do we use landfills for, and what amount of waste goes there generally? Ideally, how much should go there?
Okay, so it's a very broad question. I will start to answer, and then maybe you will have to direct me in some
Sure.
in some way. But so that depends a lot. How much is landfill depends a lot on where in the world you're situated. So I'm based in Sweden, and we don't landfill almost anything from municipal household waste because we have incineration plants. So Sweden is a cold country, so we need the heat, and
Right.
hence
Okay.
we have built up the incineration plants. But in other parts of the world, of course, landfilling is the main
Right.
treatment method for waste, right? So, and this is like the case in India and also in many other places. I'm thinking that landfilling is, if you landfill non-organics like glass or metals or whatever, it's not that harmful as long as there are not harmful substances within the waste that you are landfilling.
Okay.
But it will be there, and you can cover it. It's a cheap treatment method. But this will not be the case, right? You will have organic waste, and you will most likely have hazardous things in there as well. So then it becomes not so good because it leaks both to the water but also emits to the air.
Right.
The landfill gases. So of course you could treat the water, and you can use the gases, and then it becomes a little bit better. But still, it's like with incineration also. It's resources going to waste basically because you put it underground and you cannot use it anymore. So the best thing to do is, of course, not to put it there but to recycle it. Or the even better thing is not to get the waste at all, to keep your products for a long time and not generate so much waste.
Interesting. So what you're saying is incineration is one alternate to landfills, but will have its own hazards, right? Because let's say you have plastic waste and you're burning them, then it can create a lot of pollution in the air, right?
Yeah.
And you will have to be very selective, like what you incinerate. And one of the main areas of difficulty, I believe, is the segregation, right? Because the waste that you get from your houses or communities, right, they are not necessarily very well segregated, right?
No.
And in spite of all the best efforts by the government to kind of make people aware, there is always some dilemma, not dilemma, but confusion, like what goes in the wet waste, what goes into solid waste, and eventually what may end up in the landfills or in the incineration plants can be hazardous, right? So how do you think is the best way to handle this, and how capable the technology or let's say people are to handle it?
I do agree that it's a tricky thing to get people to sort right. So I think that's common for all over the world. It's easy for us as experts to think that it's supernatural, but it's definitely not. So that's really, really true. And then I'm thinking that you could work in both ends, right? So you can work both with what you put on the market as products, and in EU we have quite strong chemical regulations, for example, so that the products should not be as hazardous, and then of course the waste will not be so hazardous either, even though we do have problems, so it's not solving it, but working upstreams is one way. But then I'm thinking that you just have to continuously and without and being very persistent in telling the people what to do and how to do it, and make it as easy as possible. And what's easy as possible, that could differ depending on where you live and what sort of the situation you have.
Sure. So I think knowledge and awareness is the only way to deal with that. Otherwise, we'll end up.
It's also easy to say and super hard to do. So I just read a few studies for an assignment that we are doing at the Swedish EPA, and it turns out that also information people know, but then it doesn't mean that they are doing it the right way anyway.
Right,
so
right.
it only works to a certain extent, I think too. So also you have to have good and very clear like bin system, for example, or that kind of the infrastructure needs also to help, so to speak.
Right.
That's also important.
Sure. And one more question that I wanted to ask: can there be few organic ways of decomposing, or let's say all the solid waste that is generated, right? Like without treating them chemically, can a portion of them be handled organically without using any chemicals, let's say at home itself, or in common areas, so that you don't require to invest any major capital, as well as there is no side effects like hazards or all those kind
You
of
mean
things?
like food waste from one
Yeah,
area?
because like using some bioenzymes and all those things, I was reading, I was talking to someone who told that they have created some kind of bioenzymes which you can use at home, and you can kind of treat some of the waste material that comes out of your house directly using them, and you can easily convert them into fertilizers and all those things kind of things. So what do you think about that?
So I think local or household treatment from kitchen waste, that's of course an opportunity. And you could do composting, for example, or you can you can also use this. Maybe that's what you're thinking about. Like you do a little bit like the opposite of composting, which is anaerobic digestion. So you put your food in a solid container with no air, and it decomposes and becomes a very nutritious slurry.
Okay.
And that's of course good. I would be more careful using these bioenzyme things on, for example, plastic.
Okay.
That I would prefer to see done in a larger scale, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure, understood. And
because of the risk of the hazardous risk and the risk of not being decomposed fully, you will have microplastics and these kinds of things. So.
And one primary question is like, how can technology help with waste management, and what are some of the technological breakthroughs that provide good returns on solid waste management? That is, the cost of technology is not very high, but still you can kind of see good results.
Yeah, that's also a good question. The more products we buy, the trickier waste we get, basically. So if we were living more like our ancestors perhaps but with less resources and less consumption, basically material consumption, then we would have easier ways to treat. But then technology comes and sort of saves us, and from our perspective, technology is often quite expensive.
Right.
So you can invest in big sorting facilities, for example, sorting waste to a large extent and making excellent recycled materials out of that, but that will cost a lot. Also in Sweden we do hand separate a lot of things still, because that's basically cheaper and also sometimes more precise. So for example, the textile management of textile waste, then we hand sort a lot, because the human eye can easily see like this will go on a second-hand market and this will not, and things like that. So sometimes technology doesn't really help, but that wasn't what you were asking. You were asking when technology has. I do think that we are seeing a lot of development in this area as well, like these bioenzymes you mentioned. Also things like that are being developed, and in a few years' time maybe the answer would be like, yeah, use it at home, that's super good. you will get something that you could use and things like that. So development is going really fast as well.
Sure. Okay. Understood. So there are areas where technology will be more helpful. Probably like you have solid waste and somehow sensors are there, then they can segregate. But oftentimes it might just be easier for kind of hire people who would do it by hand because they
Yeah.
can spot things, spot the segregation easily. Okay.
But technology development is also, as I said, fast. So, and when technology develops, it tends to be cheaper. So
Right.
this, I'm also thinking that this will change over time. So in a few years' time, we will have maybe cheaper sorting plants, for example, with more precise technologies.
So what are some of the irreversible damages being caused to the environment because of this improper waste management, and how can that be minimized? Because there is a residue, right, that keeps getting accumulated over and over time.
Yeah, so
Uh,
that's a lot of things. Basically, it's the air pollution, like the add to the climate crisis that we see. So methane gas from landfills, for example, or from poorly run digesting plants. But then we also, of course, have leakages to the water of hazardous substances of different kinds. And then, unfortunately, we do also have the microplastic issue, which is also often coming from poor waste management, where it's not microplastics that's poorly waste managed, but the large plastic, and then it degrades out in the nature. So there we see, of course, increasing problems, and we do find these little particles everywhere we look. So that's, I think, one coming pressing issue that we need to deal with. So saying that, it's way better to put the plastic in an organized landfill where you really seal it in than to have it in more open spaces.
Right. And is there any kind of a classification of the solid waste management which a layman can also understand? Like these are 5 areas of solid waste management, solid waste, and this needs to be tackled at high priority. This can wait.
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that, but I would say that like organic waste, and that's fairly easy and not often not hazardous. So
Right.
like local compostings, or even compost in your yard.
Right.
That will not create such big problems.
Right.
But then when it comes to, for example, electronics, with a lot of could be hazardous substances in the electronics, or
Right.
paints and chemicals, medicines, those kinds of things that are hazardous, they need to really be taken away from the society, so to speak, or
Right.
be dealt with properly. And
Okay.
and then I'm thinking that plastics, which I work a lot with plastics, so that's somewhat in the middle. So the plastics may contain hazardous substances, so you don't want to burn it, but it's not dangerous as such. But if it's leaked into the nature, it causes a lot of problems. So you need to deal with that. Versus like paper that will degrade. I'm not saying that we should throw paper out in nature, but at least it will vanish in shorter time.
So plastic is one, controversial subject because without plastic, it seems people are not able to manage. And
True.
plastic is the moment it goes into out, it is always, it never decomposes completely, right? And I believe there are some divisions inside plastic also, like this plastic is kind of a more easily decomposes. Some plastic will never decompose. And but since you have been working with plastic a lot, right? Any insights that you would like to share when it comes to plastic management?
Yeah, so once again, the most important thing would be to try to reduce the amounts that we use. So plastic is a fantastic material, and it's because it's cheap, you can do whatever you want basically with it. It comes in so many different forms and shapes, and it's durable, so it will it will stay there for a long time. But all these good things is also the bad things, like that's often the case, right? So that means that we can do a lot of different plastic sorts, and that means it's difficult to recycle, for example, or it lasts long, so when it ends up in nature, it will stay there. Since it's so cheap, we're using it for these single-use consumption items like bottles or straws or bags, or things that we use for a very, very short amount of time and then just dispose.
Right.
So that sort of usage really needs to end. Then we use plastic in situations where it's super good, so like putting the weight down in cars so they use less gas, for example, or in the healthcare sector, of course, plastic is needed in order to give people the like a modern healthcare
Right.
sector. So
Right.
we cannot get rid of plastic at all. But for these fast consumption things, I think we do really need to see that we need to reduce it. And if we are still using it, we really need to collect it
Okay.
to be able to recycle it. Because as you say, it will spread, and then it doesn't degrade. Even biodegradable plastic, it degrades faster, but still it takes time. And
Right.
there are experiments with biodegradable plastic bags being put out in nature and then looked after to see what happens, and it takes several years for them to degrade. So
Okay.
that's not the best solution, basically.
So biodegradable plastic is not a very good option. It's just slightly
No,
better.
yeah, it's slightly better and good for some applications, but I
Okay.
wouldn't say that just shifting to that would solve these littering crisis that we see also.
So cutting it at the source. Don't create more plastic. If you can avoid that, that's the only solution.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
that's
we
the
would
best
kind of end.
solution, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. And regarding recycling, right? How much of the plastic can be recycled? Let's say, I believe there is a lot of impetus in recycling plastic because, as you mentioned, there are a lot of good usages of plastic. So if let's say you have collected a lot of plastic waste and you can put them to reshape them or kind of put them into factories and create something good out of it, probably that cycle can also go on for some time.
Yeah.
And that will also help us cutting the creation of more plastic, right? Because you already have plastic in the system.
Yeah, true, and it will also help us with being less dependent on fossil fuels, which is one important thing those days. But yes, so there are huge opportunities. The big problem is to get each plastic type separated, because you cannot mix them to a large extent. Then it becomes less quality. You can still do things, but not to high quality. So that's the trickiest thing, and I don't know who your listeners are, but if they are designers, they could think about what kind of plastics do I put into this product. Is it the common ones, polyethylene, polypropylene, or is it the more unusual ones? And then also, what do I put in my plastic? Is what kind of color, what kind of additives? Those things is also important to make recycling easier. We are quite bad at recycling plastic in Sweden. I don't have the Indian numbers, but in Sweden it's tricky. It's because also the fossil raw material, the oil, is really cheap. Not the last month here, but it's cheap, and recycling costs. So that's one thing. It's hard for the recycled plastic to find the market.
Eventually, it's always becoming a matter of cost, right? Because anything that you want to do, whether you want to do recycle, whether you want to incinerate, whether you want to kind of cut the costs, you will have to invest some amount of cost or budget to manage this plastic, or to even kind of spread awareness about it, right? So cost is one prime factor in this solid waste management, and I think that is where a role has to be played by all the organizations, the governments, right? Because this cost cannot be completely managed by the community or the people themselves.
No, that's true. So you can divide. If we look at municipal solid waste management in general, in Sweden we do pay a little fee for getting it collected. But that's a small fee compared to what's actually being done. But then we also have producer responsibility for certain products. So for packaging, for example, we have a producer responsibility. So that means that if you put the packaging on the market in Sweden, or this goes for the whole EU, but then and being the producer or being the importer, you pay a little fee for that packaging, and then that fee goes into the system and will pay for the treatment that happens in the end, so the collection and treatment of the packaging. And that fee is of course also paid by me when I buy the packaging, because it's transferred from the producers out to the customer, of course, but at least then I can choose a little bit. So I try not to buy so many things, then I don't have to pay these fees, and I don't have the waste to be taken care of. So that's one thing to solve it as well. You can have that on other products as well, of course.
So that's one nice deterrence. Like if you use plastic, pay for a little bit of fee so that that fee can be used to help, decompose or kind of
Yeah.
buy machinery that is needed or
Yeah.
whatever. And at
Yeah.
least if you would have to pay more, you will rethink, right? Probably that.
Exactly. So that's also good for keeping the consumption levels down.
Yeah, like carry maybe a cloth wrapper or bag from your home when you're going for
Yeah.
shopping. Don't kind of go for packaged,
No, exactly.
that.
That's another thing that's also interesting. We within EU we have a target of reducing the number of plastic bags that we use per person. So in Sweden we introduced a tax on the bags, so they
Okay.
costed quite a lot actually. And then we saw a huge reduction in the
Okay.
number of bags that were bought. So people brought their own and things like that. And you could also see people working like this with all the groceries.
Okay.
But it had a huge effect. And
Okay.
the
Same thing I
bags
think
were expensive.
yes.
So yeah.
Same thing has been applied in India also. I mean, what has happened is like one-use plastic, right? That government is very focused on reducing that. So oftentimes people carry all these bags from their home when they go
Yeah.
for grocery shopping or shopping vegetables and all. And in certain sections like medical and all, I think it is still allowed to use plastic because of some
Yeah.
urgency and all those things. But in general, people are discouraged from using plastic. But the convenience, right, that people get, right, like you're coming from office and on the way you
Yeah.
buy something, you're probably not carrying that, all those bags from home. So
No.
that is where I think plastic jumps in and
Yeah.
creates the mess. So you have to be
Yeah, that's
slightly
true. So we're
planned.
we're living in a society where convenience is one main thing, right? So
Right,
we want things to be easy and
right,
fairly fast and things like that.
correct.
So yeah, those are
You-
hindering us.
Yeah.
Those things are hindering us, but yeah.
Sure. And one more question I wanted to ask is like different countries, right? Like Singapore and all, they are also very good at kind of solid waste management, I believe. And how much do you think these countries can help each other by sharing technology or sharing like ways of managing resources or the solid waste? Do you think there is a chance of some big cooperation there?
Yeah, I do think that knowledge transfer is always a good idea. So definitely we can learn from each other in different aspects. Definitely. I've worked a little bit in other countries, and what I do see is that what you need to make sure is that you sort of bring the citizens on the full journey, so to speak. So to speak. So it's
Okay.
important to have a good explanation and information to the
Okay.
citizens, but also to the decision makers, to make them be, how should I put it, to convince them that
Okay.
they could take this leap, because otherwise people will do it stepwise.
Right.
But it's possible to take bigger leaps, but then you have to have the decision makers well informed as well, so that they know what to do and what the possibilities are.
Sure. So basically, if there are many other people doing it and you are in touch with them, right, you see them taking those actions, you can also learn from them, and
Yeah.
that hesitation will go away. And I think, you can adopt some of because many countries are geographically also very similar, right?
Yeah.
And generally, waste is similar in every country, I believe, because, either
Yeah,
it's
that's
food.
really funny actually. If we look in an Indian garbage bag from a household and a Swedish one, they look almost the same. So lots of
Right.
packaging and some food waste. That's
Right.
what we'll
So
see. Yeah.
there is,
In they're almost the
right.
same amounts actually. Not
Correct.
maybe amounts, but the shares would be the same. Yeah.
Right. So I think knowledge transfer can help here if
Yeah.
somebody has invented some, not just technology, but some interesting way of dealing with, let's say, solid waste, right? Probably
Yeah.
it can be shared, and that can also be very helpful.
Yeah, and then of
And
course the
you-
local circumstances could be a bit different. So, like
Right.
for example, Sweden is a cold country, India is a warm country. So,
Right.
so that's a difference. So you may have to do things slightly different and adjust them, but the basic knowledge could be transferred, and also the other way between both
Right.
countries. So not only
Right.
one way. Yeah.
Yeah, because even if you see India, right, like the northern part near the Himalayas, it's very cold.
Yeah.
So I think some intersection might be there in that way, and in general also I think there must be some common principles, right? Like this bioenzymes, for example. I mean, I don't know how effective it is, but used in small parts with some kind of meticulous planning, right, probably would help. And this kind of knowledge can be shared, right, which is not yet used and not yet common, probably. Going to the next question, what can be some of the business opportunities with respect to solid waste management? Should, all the businessmen also kind of pay some attention here, because there may be some opportunities here for them?
I definitely think so. So if I'm broadening the waste management perspective a little bit, and also bringing in reuse of products like refurbishing and those kinds of things. So if just use it, sell it, secondhand market, those kinds of, and also washing and repairing, packaging, things like that, that will create, of course, lots of local jobs. Because your reuse systems are often local. So that's one big opportunity, I would say, and that's also being more circular, so like more circular economy. And then, of course, recycling is the same thing. So if you could recycle materials, that could really be a business opportunity if you find a good value chain for it. Of course, also landfilling is like you have to run that as a business, but just thinking that we should strive from landfilling to something else.
Right. Yeah, I mean, landfilling, is a big problem. And as I see, because what happens is like the people who live near those areas, right, start getting affected because landfills, oftentimes they start leaking something, chemicals in the water, as you mentioned, right, in the beginning. And if some businessman can take some kind of targets, like, I will do this technologies and kind of reduce the amount of landfills required, it would be a great,
that would be really good. I
achievement.
do agree.
Yeah. And one last question that I wanted to ask is like, how can people in organizations or governments come together to solve this complex problem? For example, how can governments help people and people help governments?
I think that's a really smart question. We live in one society, right? And we choose the government that we have. So that's one thing. You could vote for the ones that will do the best from that perspective. But then, of course, also as a citizen, you can be aware and informed and try to do your best. That's actually helping your government, and also trying to be a front runner in these issues. So, like, say for example, like one municipality will introduce some sort of sorting system. Join the system. That's helping your government. And then, of course, from the government's perspective, it's interesting to hear what's easy or not for the citizens, and how have these sorts of dialogues, like what's working and what's not working, what could we adjust, and what should we sort of what buttons should we press to make this better, so to speak. So a dialogue is of course fruitful, I think, also for the government to have to be able to design the best systems.
Because if you think about like this greenhouse, right, in that context, there is this whole idea of carbon credits and all, right, where people who do waste, they have to buy carbon credits, and that carbon credit goes into kind of planting some kind of trees and all those things in some other neighboring areas. And though you are bringing waste into the system, but you are also ensuring that there is a balance by kind of planting equal amount of greenery, and so maybe
that's a good thing. And I think it was Ecuador I read about some weeks ago, trying to introduce like waste credits in some way. I'm not, maybe I shouldn't brought up, because I'm not really sure how it was supposed to work, but like in the same way, like we can treat the waste and sell like recycled content credits, those kinds of things. So there are things you can do definitely with those kinds of things, and also of course public partnerships, like joint investments in infrastructure and those kinds of things on a bigger scale.
Yeah, because waste management is very, very closely related to our health, right? It's not something like, it's not like optional, right? Whether you do it or not. If you don't process waste, right, starts lying in the environment in which we live, and the impact is very, very easily and very quickly seen. It's not. It doesn't even take like a year, right? So
no, that's true. So sometimes I do get surprised when people are not more engaged, actually, but then I'm working with it, so I might not be the right person to be that, but I do think that's surprising and a bit sad. Like when you see the village, like a village, and they have like an open dump site next to them, so that's basically their environment that they are ruining. So that's a bit sad. But also easy to communicate that this could be easily done better.
Right, sure. Any best practices that you have seen in Sweden that you would like others to kind of probably adopt?
So we are trying to get reuse to work a lot, and to repair and those kinds of things, to get things more circular. But basically that's the other way around. But and I know that you have good systems for food boxes in cities in India where you have these. I don't remember the name, unfortunately, but people going around with lunch boxes out to offices.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the other way around. We should learn from that. But other than that, I think that the recycling business in industries, or in Sweden it's a clean industry, so that's maybe something that could be a good practice.
Sure. Okay, Asa, thanks a lot for joining this discussion. And anybody who is watching this would probably understand that it's a hard problem. Solid waste management is not an easy problem, and your awareness can kind of solve a lot of problems. That is, you don't buy plastic, you don't be a part of the supply chain cycle itself where plastic is generated more and more. That's the only hope. And of course, as I mentioned, governments, organizations, and people, if they start having the dialogue, there are a lot of activities in which they can cooperate, and that can easily result into kind of a reduction of solid waste. And also we kind of slightly discussed about various types of waste like plastic and all. Plastic is probably the most important thing to be kept in mind. Be aware about it. Even if it's a biodegradable plastic, probably it will still leave a residue, or it will take a very long time to kind of decompose. So don't use that also. It shouldn't become a easy substitute for bad plastic. So on
It's,
that note,
it's a
yeah,
very good summary you made there. And I do
yeah,
think that I do want to send some hope also to whoever is listening, that you could really influence yourself how much waste
right,
you produce. So you can really think about your own sort of footprint here,
right.
which I would encourage everyone to do.
Right, because we are seeing a lot of problems with air quality already because of
Yeah.
not necessarily because of solid waste management only, but it's definitely playing a part where farmers, they don't know how to decompose of their last year's waste, right? So they just burn it, and it
Yeah.
just immediately kind of
That's a
becomes
big
part of,
problem.
yeah. So little bit of awareness, a little bit of kind of a helpfulness can go a
Because
long way.
if you burn
Yeah,
waste like uncontrolled, it's really
right.
really bad. Then it's better
Yeah,
to put it on a like a proper landfill, actually.
yeah, correct. So incineration is also not going to help.
No, I mean
Again,
you need to do, if you should incinerate, you need to have those proper plants with the air
right,
quality management or
right,
cleaning and things like that. Then it's
right,
okay, but still, it's like resources going up in smoke. So
right, right.
it's not the preferable option, I would say.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Asa. I mean, it's up for people to find out like what they can do, what's daily actions they can do at their home also. If they can segregate properly at home, then plants can process it easily. If they can kind of be helpful with all the, let's say, community helpers, right? People who help with the cleaning, they can be more compassionate towards them and kind of take few easy steps at a time. That can create large impact. Otherwise, governments and all are already doing whatever they can, but yeah, I do feel there's a lot of hope still, and they should still kind of take more pains, because in India also the problem of solid waste management is pretty bad. I feel right now it's not where it should be. It, like, in some areas it's better. In some areas it's, where there's the amount of people is more, the number of people who live is more. I think it still needs a lot of awareness, lot of there's a lot of scope of improvement, frankly speaking.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Asa. Thanks for joining. Have a
Thank
nice
you
day.
so much, and the best of luck with waste management.
Sure. Thank you.